Hello, and welcome everyone to the National Book Festival. I'm Jennifer Abella, a copy editor at the Washington Post magazine, and I'm so excited to be here today to talk with fantasy author Victoria Schwab. As you heard earlier, we will be taking questions at the end, so be thinking of your own, and there are mics out in the audience. And a reminder that Victoria will be signing books downstairs at 1:30.
Yeah.
So Victoria, you've brought us on a journey through alternate universes full of stoic musicians, sneaky thieves, and rakish pirates in the Shades of Magic series. And you've immersed us in a world where people gain superpowers through near-death experiences in her villain's duology. And she has taken us to supernatural worlds full of monsters and ghosts in your novels for young adults and middle graders. Each of those books have kept us glued to the page. Your latest novel, Vengeful, is a follow-up to Vicious from 2013. Can you give the audience a little background on that world?
Of course. First of all, thank you for coming out. This is my first National Book Festival, so I'm really ridiculously excited. So fancy. So it's really important to understand that Vicious is a book that I wrote completely in secret. Basically, my entire career was falling apart 3 years in, as it tends to do. This industry has a very, very high mortality rate. And so everything was falling apart, and I was falling out of love with writing. And I needed to find a way back in, or I was going to quit. And so I decided I was going to write one more book. And I was, instead of trying to find an audience, I was just going to write whatever I wanted to read. And I know that sounds really obvious in retrospect. We should all do that. But it's a business, and it's very easy to try and write what you think other people want to read. But I thought, well, screw this. If no one's going to read me anyway, I'm just going to write for myself. And I'm going to know that if this book doesn't find its audience, then at least I was true to myself. And so I just started asking myself, what do I want to write? And I wanted to write a book about villains. I wanted to write a book about the idea that superpowers do not make us good people. They just make us people with powers. And that if anything, and this is kind of a theme across all of my books, power makes us worse. Like, power is a conduit for all of our aggressions, all of our wants and desires, and it kind of it disinhibits us, you know? And so I wrote a book about two pre-med students who discover the key to superpowers are near-death experiences. And they set out to manufacture their own supernatural abilities by controlling their own suicide and resurrection. And everything goes predictably, horribly wrong, just atrociously wrong. And the book actually starts 10 years later, when one of them is breaking out of prison, where he's been for murder, and the other one has been on a decade-long killing spree of every superpowered person he can find. And that was Vicious. And then I was lucky enough that after 3 years of writing it, I showed somebody. I showed my agent. I was like, hey, surprise. I wrote this really weird book, and my agent didn't represent science fiction and fantasy, but she was very supportive, and she said, I can try to sell it. And I said, yeah, let's just try, because it had done what it needed to do for me. It gave me my love of writing back. I thought, if this doesn't sell, that's fine, but I loved writing this. And kind of, you know the rest of the story, and that Vicious did sell. Vicious sold to Tor, and it came out 5.5, 6 years ago. And I always wanted to write a sequel, but because this was my first adult novel, because I didn't have a huge track record, it was very important that I wrote a book that could stand alone. Because the last thing I wanted to do was write a book that had a cliffhanger ending and have it not sell well and have me not be able to tell the rest of that story that had happened to me once already in publishing. So about 2 or 3 years later, I'm writing the Shades of Magic series, and I'm like, hey, Tor, I really want to write the sequel to Vicious. And they were like, Vicious has a sequel. And I was like, in my heart, it does. It's always meant to have a sequel. And, you know, Tor was like, okay, like, the book sells really well. After Shades of Magic is done, you can write this sequel. Now, what happened was I finished the Shades of Magic series, and Conjuring of Light, the third book in the Shades of Magic series, was the book that I was proudest of in my entire career. And suddenly, Vengeful became the book that had to follow Conjuring of Light. And it had been 4 years since I had worked on Vicious. And I don't know about you all, but you change a lot as a human every year. And you change a lot as a writer, and the thing is that books are static entities, but authors are not. We're continuing to grow, and I had, in those 5 years between Vicious and Vengeful, my whole life had changed. I had come out, I had found my place a little bit more in the world, I had found my place in this industry. The world was on fire, even more than usual. Everything was ruinous, and when I went back to tell the rest of Victor and Eli's story, my two leads, I kept finding my attention going to this set of 3 women in the story, and they started out as minor characters. You know, they started out as conduits for Victor and Eli's story, a continuation of Vicious. But what I found was that 2018 me, 2017 and 2018 and 2019 me needed a story about female rage, needed a story about the avatars of female anger. And so essentially Vengeful became a conversation with Vicious, where if Vicious is a book about Victor and Eli taking control, Vengeful is a book about Victor and Eli losing control, and about these 3 women, June and Sydney and Marcela, learning to take control back from a world that has taken it away from them. And so these books are not simple sequels, not simple pairs. They exist in conversation, as I think books should. And yeah, that's a very long-winded answer of saying that we expect writers to be as static as the works that they make, but we can't be. We have to constantly be growing and changing with the work. And I have no doubt that if and when I write the 3rd book in this series, 21-year-old or 2021, 2022-year-old me, but you know what I'm trying to say. I'm tired inside. I'm sure that will be a different iteration of myself as well. I'll be 34, 35 instead of 25 instead of 30.
You had said on Twitter that you had to rewrite the entire draft of Vengeful.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, one day it will hurt less to talk about, but essentially, as I was saying, I started writing a book that was a sequel. When I sat down to write Vengeful after being away from it for 4 years, I thought I was writing the next chapter of Victor and Eli's story, and so that's what I did, and that's what I turned in. And my editor, one of the hardest conversations I've ever had, she called me up. I turned in the book at the end of December, and she called me at the beginning of January of the year that Vengeful was supposed to come out. And she said, "This is a very good book. This is an excellent book, and I'm sure that your existing fans will be perfectly satisfied." It's the worst words you ever want to hear, especially if you're someone like me who really thrives on the challenge of changing the narrative with each contributing book. And she said, "The problem right now is that this book could be so much more than it is, and now you have a choice. If you choose to put out the book that you've written, I will support you, I will always support you, and a lot of people will like it. If you choose to make the book what it's capable of being and really add to this narrative, you will have to rewrite it from scratch, and I can only give you 2 months." Right? It's like a bit of a disastrous choice, and I went and I cried for several days straight. I just want to be really blunt about that. I hung up the phone and I had a little scream moment, and I genuinely considered putting out the book that I had written because it was a good book. It's so much easier to delete a bad book. But in the end, she was right, and I embarked on one of the hardest 2 months of my life, and I scrapped a 100,000-word book, and I rewrote it from page 1. And there were times along the way when I doubted that it would be worth it. And the fact of the matter is, the book that came out last year when Vengeful debuted is something that I'm just extraordinarily proud of. And I think so much of being an author and having a career in this industry is understanding that nothing that you write is written in blood or stone, that you have to be willing to get better. You never want to get to a point where the people around you think that good enough is good enough. So yeah.
Good enough.
But retrospect is really fun. It's fun to talk about it now, but if you had seen me a year and a half ago, I was like a shell of a human.
Did anything survive from the original draft besides the character?
Well, that was the maddening thing, right? The characters were totally fine, but the plot had to change. No, nothing more than maybe 200 words here and there. Nothing. I didn't get to transplant any chapters because the entire construct of the story had to change.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's really hard to think about some days. I have like note cards from when I'm rebuilding, because these books are not linear. They're not structured simply. They don't move from beginning to end. They move in and out of timelines. And Vicious had essentially 2 primary characters with 2 secondary characters, and each one of them had a past and a present. This book has like 10. And the thing that you learn is that you can change time or you can change point of view. You can't really change both at the same time. So everything had to be framed and shored up in a very careful way so that I could move through the narrative. And you can find online, there are pictures of my editor and I went to a cabin in upstate New York. It's like the beginning of a horror novel, but we didn't kill each other. And laid out every scene of the book on note cards. And there are pictures of 300 note cards in different formations scattered across the floor of this cabin. And we were there for a week. And it was brutal. I think I tore down the bones and the scaffolding of it maybe 5 or 6 times before I found the right one.
So I've heard that you write out of order as well.
Yeah.
So when you're alternating points of view and timeline, do you plot out that before you start writing?
Okay, so
and the order they go in?
The thing you have to understand is, when I say I write out of order, I literally mean every chapter of my book is like, you open a new puzzle and you just dump all the pieces out and you start assembling like corners. And then you're like, well, this little piece clearly goes somewhere down towards, like I do that with every chapter. So when I start writing a chapter, I will maybe write the first line, the last line, some of the dialogue that goes towards the end of the scene, and I start building it out in almost like a blossoming way. It makes sense in my head. I once told my agent this, and she looked at me with so much horror. She was like, "Why would you ever do this?" So, but to mitigate that, I'm an incredibly strict outliner. So I outline, I map out my books completely, beat for beat. I understand all 300 scenes, and then what I'm able to do is I pull out the scene I want to work on. So I go based on the emotional beat. So like the book that I was just finished writing, which comes out next fall, is a character-driven novel. And so it's really dependent on like which emotional beats I feel I'm capable of writing on that day. And it's nice to know, okay, I'm in a very introspective space today and I think I can write this, essentially a nervous breakdown. And so I'm gonna pull that scene forward and I have my beats at the top of the page. I know what needs to happen in this scene. And then I can let the scene flow and happen organically, and then I essentially put it back on the shelf where it needs to be. So I always cringe when people call me out on writing out of order, because I do truly, but I allow myself to write out of order within a house I have already built. I don't wander lost in the woods. People are like, where's the joy without the discovery? And I'm like, that's anxiety. For me, the joy comes from the pleasure of executing a strategy, not from wandering lost. I need to build a map, and then maybe I'll wander down the wrong path, but I'll never wander off a cliff.
When you are plotting out your scenes, is it harder for you to write those character beats or more of the plot or dialogue?
Oh, I hate character. They're the most important things in my books, and I always say that I'm a character writer who writes under the illusion of plot. Like, my books are all character books that are pretending to be plot books, and yet I think the thing about plot is when you've got it wrong. And I've fed the story monster in myself to know exactly when I've got it wrong. I can feel that almost thud of warning. The problem with character is it's like a picture out of focus. When you've got it wrong by just the smallest amount is when it feels the most disconcerting. So when you stare at a picture that's just barely out of focus, it's the most maddening thing. And so I feel like with plot, I have a better sense of when I've gone wrong, and with character, it's something that I have to layer over and over in revision. And I'm such a type A person that I'm like 17 books in and I'm like, why can't I just do it right the first time? If I can't do it right the first time now, I'm never gonna do it right the first time. And the answer, of course, is you're not. You can't write a book right until you write it wrong. And it doesn't save me from just like the existential dread of not being able to hit every little focused moment. But I will say, If anyone follows me online, I exist with a huge amount of angst, and I understand that. I project all of that, but I want to be very clear. So every now and then someone will be like, so do you not love it? And you have to understand that much like my enjoyment coming out of executing a plan, every time I write a book, there is a moment that I hit, and I never hit it until the last revision. But on the very last revision, right before it goes to print, every single time, I read it as a reader instead of the writer. And the moment that happens, that last tiny step before the end where I'm able to forget that I wrote it, which is its own weird neurotic condition, because then you're like, I can never do it again. I don't know who did this. It wasn't me. There's no winning. But I live for that. I live for the moment when it's typeset and I go through with that fine-tooth comb at the very end and I realize that I'm a reader now, that I have stepped away from it and gotten that distance. So I do love it by the end, but I am dragged kicking and screaming through the creative process to get there.
What superpower would you have if you could choose one?
Oh, I think about this a lot, obviously. I've been asked this in the form of magic, in the form of superpower, and I have what I feel to be an excellent answer, especially for readers. I feel like every reader can relate to this. So, I want the ability to control time with a massive caveat, which is that everything that goes wrong when people control time happens when we go back. You cannot go back. Every time you go back, you butterfly effect and everything is ruined. So, I want to be able to control time, but only moving forward. Meaning, I want the ability to pause, to slow down, or to speed up. Because there are moments that I would like to be over faster, there are moments that I would like to last longer, and there are days when I would just like to hit pause on everything and catch my breath and lie on the sofa and read a book. And I feel like if I could control time in that way, I would be so happy. So no, I don't need to go back. I think that's just a fool's errand, but I would love the ability to just stop.
If you could team up with any of your superpowered characters.
I mean, the thing about my superpowered characters is I'm not sure I want to be anywhere near any of them at any time. They don't seem like the most balanced human beings. So June, my favorite superpower that I've ever written, one of the leads in Vengeful, is a young woman who goes only by June. And June is a living voodoo doll. You have to imagine Mystique from X-Men if Mystique could not only take on another person's visual identity, but if any damage you did to Mystique would happen to the person she was imitating instead of her. June is absolutely invulnerable. She comes in handy, but she's also made an immense sacrifice for it in that she can never be herself. The only vulnerable manifestation that June has is if she were to take on her actual form. But I do think that June is she's a really real badass murderer, so she's great at killing people, and that seems to come in handy for her, but also she can get into almost anywhere. So I do feel like if I had to pick a friend, she's a bit flighty, but she's not, there are other characters in these books who would just literally burn the world down, and I don't really want to be near any of them, so I don't trust anyone except June.
Like I said before, you publish books for adults, middle graders, children, young adults.
I'm missing picture books, and then I'm going to corrupt everybody. Yeah.
What is the hardest part about changing mindsets from project to project?
I love this question because I think a lot of people make the assumption that adult books are harder and darker and that children's books are lighter and easier. And for me, that doesn't track at all. I don't know if I see any one of them as harder than the other. The thing you have to understand is, yes, I write for middle grade, YA, adult, comics, everyone who wants to read them. But when I sit down to write a book, regardless of the category or the shelf that it falls in, I'm writing for a version of myself. So City of Ghosts and Tunnel of Bones, these are written for 10-year-old me. And 10-year-old me was super morbid, death-obsessed, really kind of scared of that boundary, that line. I grew up with a sick parent, and it felt like if I could just pay enough attention, I could keep people alive. So I wanted books that talked about death, not through metaphor or analogy, but I just wanted to know that other kids thought about death, right? When I am writing my YA books, like the Monsters of Verity books, I am writing for 17-year-old me. And 17-year-old me was angry, 17-year-old me did not fit into the world. 17-year-old me would have very happily burned the whole world down to be happy. Like, I was not the kind of kid who understood books in which when we give young women power, they are expected to self-sacrifice it for the greater good. Like, if you had handed me power, I would have been a supervillain. I would have done a lot of selfish things with it. But that's what my YA novels are about, powerful girls trying to survive in difficult worlds. And when I'm writing my adult books, I'm writing for whatever age I am at the time. I was 25 when I wrote Vicious. I was 27 when I wrote A Darker Shade of Magic. I was 30 to 32 when I wrote Addie LaRue. Like, they are moving along with me, so I don't think of any of them as harder or easier. The YA books I write are probably my overtly the darkest, but my middle grade books are not light. My adult books are probably weirdly the funniest, but that's a bad sign. You should know something about me, which is that if you ever find yourself laughing in any of my books, someone's about to die. Right? And I do this on purpose, right? I want you to expel the air. I want you to relax in a moment, and I think you have to have levity along with horror. It's one of the most important kind of binaries that do exist in the balance of prose, and so, yeah, I don't think any of them are easier. I think if I had to pick, adult is the most intuitive for me because it's the truth I'm at in this moment. So I don't have to ask myself, who was I 20 years ago? I have to just ask myself, who am I right now? So in that way, there are fewer boundaries between it, but no, I love it all. I'm just mixing that picture book. Gonna get it, and then I'm just gonna ruin everyone. It's gonna be like a little fuse.
One of the things that I love about all of your books is each world is very specific and they come with their own set of rules. How does your approach to world building differ from, say, Vicious and Vengeful and Shades of Magic, which are two very different kinds of worlds?
I mean, setting is my primary character. It's the first thing I think about. Most of my stories revolve around an outsider, and in order to understand an outsider, you need to understand insiders. In order to understand insiders, you need to understand the world that they fit cleanly into. So in order to create people who are perpendicular to their environment, who don't feel as if they belong, I have to understand the environment. I love creating worlds, and I love creating rules inside those worlds that you mistake for innate aspects. Like, for me, the most beautiful world building is intuitive. It is simple. It is like, I'm gonna make this as short as possible, but I have this philosophy that I really, really love, which is that there are two kinds of fantasy authors. There are fantasy authors that build a house. Both of them build a house, right? When we build a world, when we build a story, we're building a house. The first fantasy author builds the house, builds and decorates every single room, and gives you as the reader the key, and says, go into the house, look around, explore. If you don't see it, it's not there. They let you see the entire boundary of the environment. That's much more like Tolkien. But then there are fantasy authors, and I consider myself in the second category, who build the house, decorate a lot of it, and don't give you a key, but maybe they leave the curtains open on one of the rooms. Now you can see into that room, you can see through a doorway, perhaps down a hall, and it is your job as the reader to infer everything you cannot see. So I have to give you enough information about what you do see to kind of guess at what the rest of the house looks like. And I like this because then as a series goes on, as a world expands, the best example is in the Shades of Magic series. In book 2, you meet a character named Alucard Emery. Alucard Emery has a magical ability that was not introduced in A Darker Shade of Magic. It was never introduced. And yet, it's a magical ability that makes sense as inference, as something that you are extrapolating from what you do know about the world. Now, if Alucard Emery had ridden into Gathering of Shadows on a dragon, you probably would have been like, I didn't see any dragons through the living room window. I didn't see any sign of dragons. I don't think there are dragons in this world, so I'm a little put off by the fact that suddenly there are dragons. So it's a matter of understanding what you're giving the reader so that they can guess at what they can't see. And like that to me is the most exciting balance of how do I build a world that you feel as the reader you are beginning to understand and you're getting to know without feeling like you've explored all of it.
Have you ever been writing a book and realized that you've broken your own rules and then have to kind of go back?
I try not to, obviously. The only time I've ever done it is that I was that person who needed a glossary for A Darker Shade of Magic because there are fictional words. Now, the logical thing would have been to write that glossary as I was going, or even to write the glossary after finishing Darker Shade of Magic so that when I started Gathering of Shadows, I had a glossary and didn't say, like, break the laws of language or add in a new word that meant the same thing as a word that I've already used or something like that. I have done that twice by accident. And one tiny, tiny mistake, it's not a mistake because I chose it, but this is the thing, authors do mess up. In Vicious, Stell, who's the detective who's kind of overseeing the EOs and the case, his name, turns out his first name is given to you at one point. Totally forgot this, right? And the problem is his first name was given to you as Marcus. Now, I started writing Vengeful, and I realized that Marcus needed to be Marcela's husband because they have this name echoing thing. And I was like, this is fine. I mention it in the briefest of moments. No one is ever going to notice that I changed his name from Marcus to Joe, right? It's fine. I'm just going to change his name from Marcus to Joe. And everything was fine until one of my foreign publishers decided to make massive amounts of marketing material featuring every character in the book. And they made like a giant poster that was like, meet Marcus Stell. And I was like, God, like really of all the details you pick the one that I like consciously was like, I'm gonna put it under the rug and like no one's gonna notice it. So there are really, really minute ones, but I take a lot of time with my world designing it to have a bit of give, a bit of flex, so that I can introduce new ideas as I want to without them feeling like they're world breaking. So really the only mistake is one word that I gave two meanings to, basically, in Shades of Magic, which I think is fine, because if you want to go down a really deep linguistic tunnel, we, in the English language, have tons of words that mean the same thing and tons of words that are spelled the same and mean different things, so it's fine. That's just a quirk of language. But the Marcus Stell, Joe Stell thing, I think I'm gonna put something in book 3 that like references that Marcus was his first name, but Joe was the second name, like the middle name, and I'm gonna find a way to smooth it out. But that one's completely my bad. I'm very sorry.
Well, speaking of a third book,
yeah.
Do you already kind of have a plot in mind, or did you have one in the back of your mind when you were writing Vengeful?
I had a few aspects for a third. So my rules with these are I won't write a book unless I have enough story to make the book worth it. I don't want to continue a thing just because people are enjoying it. That's how all television gets ruined, is by being like, Supernatural should have stopped at 5 seasons. Instead, it's like 14 seasons long. They were beautiful 5 seasons, you guys, but like, I don't ever want to be that author that continues something past the point, but there are a few things I really want to do. And so I'm working through it right now. I'm in the steeping part, which usually lasts 1 to 2 years, where I'm figuring out, do I have enough to make it worth it? And the hardest question, can I make it better than the last? Like, that's the scariest thing for me, is I never want you to be able to compare apples to apples with my books, but I still need to feel confident that I can deliver a third villain's book that is as satisfying as Vicious and Vengeful. Because I live in a world where, like, I've just finished my 17th book, and every time I finish a book, it's like a little step up the mountain. And there's this game that I feel like half of you have never seen, but it was on Price is Right for a very long time, and it's this mountain climber, and he just climbs up, and then he gets closer and closer to the edge, and you never want to go over the edge. And every step you take up with each book, as you try to get better and better and better, you also risk kind of the topple down. So I never want pride or ambition to drive me over the edge like that. So I won't do it until I'm absolutely positive. But right now it's looking pretty good. I've figured out the concept and I've cleared it with my team, so in 4 years.
Can you talk about what's next for you?
Yeah, sure. So my next book comes out next October. My next adult book, my next middle grade book comes out on Tuesday, but you can buy it here. So it's called Tunnel of Bones. But my next adult novel comes out next October, and it is called The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. It is a standalone novel, and it is about a young woman in 1700s France who sells her soul to the devil to live forever and ends up cursed to be forgotten by everyone she meets. And so it's about her life over 300 years where the devil becomes the only constant. And it's about her life over 1 year in New York when she meets a young man who remembers her name. And that comes out next October. And I was working on it, and I have been working on it for 8 years. So proof that you don't always write books quickly.
If people want to start lining up for questions.
Yeah, I think we have like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Do it. Be bold. It's very scary sitting up here. Join me.
We'll start over here.
I guess my question is, I was just reading the Shades of Magic trilogy, and what struck me about the books was how distinct every single character felt, even the minor ones. So I guess I was wondering how you sort of help shape those different points of view and help make them distinct from each other.
Thank you. It's actually really important to me. I have a philosophy that whether a character takes up a major role or whether they're only on the page for a single scene, they should feel like they could be the main character of their own narrative. So you should be able to feel like in another iteration of Shades of Magic, Hastra is a main character. You're not going to see them as a main character in this book, but they need to be rounded enough. And so I base all of my characters on 3 pillars. I don't build a character without being able to answer 3 questions about them. What do they fear? What do they want? And what are they willing to do to get it? And I kind of build what I hope is a character in the round out of those 3 elements and know that I could give them a story within the narrative and they'd be able to hold it.
Over here.
Me? Hi. Okay, so I wanted to speak to a little, I know you're primarily a fantasy author. This is the genre fiction room. I've always loved fantasy and genre fiction. I think you've probably noticed this being in publishing. There has always been a little bit of a different viewpoint that I think people approach genre fiction with than literary fiction.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think genre fiction is kind of viewed as entertaining, and literary fiction is kind of given that like important with the capital I.
Pedestal.
Yeah, and so I wanted to hear from you, I think, what you think fantasy and books like that can give that maybe contemporary fiction or literary fiction can't, or even if giving that or doing that is even the primary point.
I mean, I think both categories have the potential to be excellent and both categories have the potential to be bad. Like, a good story is a good story, and I do think it's troubling that we so continually weight literary above genre. I think one of the most beautiful things about fantasy is they simultaneously give us the ability to escape and the ability to see ourselves. We so often think that realism is the place in which we see ourselves, realism is the place in which we live, when the truth is that fantasy not only has the ability to take people cast so often to the margins of a narrative and center them, and create worlds that are aspirational in that way, where we get to see ourselves in positions of power when we don't see ourselves like that in the real world. But also, there's this fallacy that because it's fantasy, it's not truth. And it absolutely is truth. We are constructing. It's the same way that people think that photography is not a lie. Like, photography is a lie. Like, you are choosing what to photograph and what to shape and how to create a lens and what to exclude. And both fantasy and realism do that exactly the same way. I just think that we have a really amazing opportunity in fantasy to show not only the world as it is, but the different ways that the world can be.
Thank you.
Okay, I actually have 2 questions. One is really fast and kind of goofy, and the other one's more in depth. The first goofy question is, what kind of dog is Dole? Because I was picturing a big black German Shepherd, and I was wondering if you knew.
Dole's a Great Dane.
Big
so
pupper.
close, a black Great Dane.
Big pupper. Okay. Second question is, I was thinking about this, and since you've established in Vicious that people's will to live is what reflects their superpowers, and I was wondering, in that case, what was Serena's will to live that gave her this complete manipulation ability? Because, like, we know Sydney just didn't want to die and wanted her sister to come back, and we know that Victor was just in a lot of pain. So I was wondering what, if you've thought about this at all, what gave her that, I want to influence people, with big old air quotes?
I think, to be honest, so it's a component. It's your personality and it's your will and it's your circumstance. And the fact is, I'm not sure if Serena would have climbed back out of that lake if Sydney hadn't been in the lake with her. But so much of what influences Serena's ability to live and control the situation is her not wanting her sister to die. her wanting to be able to control that moment. And so I don't think if Sydney had been in the water with her that Serena would have come back.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about Addie LaRue. You've talked a lot about how you changed as an author over the years, and since Addie LaRue is such a long-standing project for you, I was wondering if you could talk about that transformation a bit.
Of course. Yeah, so I started writing Addie LaRue 8 years ago, and by that I mean I started brainstorming and I started sitting with it. I don't start a book unless I have a few crucial pieces, the voice, the narrative, and the ending. I never have started a book without knowing exactly how it ends. The ending is the thing I'm working towards. It's the thing that I use to reverse engineer the entire emotional arc of the rest of the book. So for the first few years, I didn't write Addie because I felt I wasn't a good enough writer. And I mean that like with no false humility. I knew what I wanted to do with Addie. I knew it was the kind of story I only got to tell once. And I wanted to make sure I was a strong enough writer and I had the education of other books behind me in order to do it. Once I felt like I might be a strong enough writer, I still didn't have the most satisfying ending. And I'm actually, in retrospect, so glad I did not write this book 5 years ago because I would not have given it the ending that it deserved. I do feel also like I could not wait another 10 years to write this because this is a book in many ways about the boundary of 30, especially these days, and how lost you can feel and how you can feel like you knelt down to tie your shoes and by the time you look up, everyone around you is a mile ahead. It's that feeling like you're on the boundary between young adulthood and everyone's telling you you should know what to do, and you feel like somewhere along the way everyone else made choices and you still had questions. It's so much about that, the kind of the millennial quandary. And I'm really like one of the human characters in the book, Henry, the boy, is absolutely a reflection of who I would be if I hadn't found writing. And he really is the most truth that I've ever put into one of my books. And so I felt like I hit 30 and then I was like, this is the time for me to write this book. Not necessarily because I'm the best writer I will ever be, but because this feels like the most honest time to explore these themes. So from the time I figured that out, it took roughly 2 years to write. And I was kind of propelled by not wanting to enter that next stage of my life with its new questions and new problems before I had solved this particular one on the page.
So I recently just finished Vengeful, and I fell in love with Marcela's character, just especially in the beginning, because you see her like, she's not afraid to stand up in what she believes in, and she just kind of takes control of the room, if you could put it like that. Yeah. Did you base her off somebody, or like, what was her inspiration for the character?
I love this question because I wrote several very powerful female characters, and they had something in common, which they were all really defeminized. Now I did this with Mackenzie Bishop and Kate Harker and Lila Bard because they were aspirational characters for me. I'm not a hyper-feminine person. I've never been terribly attached to my gender identity, and I wanted to create characters that I wanted to see. But in so doing, I made a kind of pattern. And the problem with patterns is that we can read into them. And I started getting the feedback that readers were worried that I thought that femininity was an opposite of power. Right? So I took a challenge with Marcela to see if I could write a character who was in every way Delilah Bard's opposite in terms of femininity, in terms of body and ideal and image and present day, like the embodiment of what we think of as female power and what we think of somebody who exists at that extreme end of the spectrum, and show that she was just as powerful as Lila Bard. And so I really wrote Marcela as an answer to that ringing concern. I wanted to show her in that way. And she also just became an avatar for all of the anger that comes with all of those microaggressions, all of those being put down every day in small ways. But yeah, she was written as an answer to Lila.
I think we have time for about 2 more questions. Go ahead.
Okay, great, thanks. Hi there. So I've heard you say before that you have a very adversarial relationship with fear, and I really loved that. So my question is, as you continue writing and facing new challenges, how do you cultivate and nurture that adversarial relationship?
Oh, it's hard. It's hard. As I say, if you follow me online, you know that my greatest fear is failure. And for failure, I don't mean not selling books, though of course that's always very scary. What I mean is I have a fear of letting down myself and my readers and my publishers. I have a fear of the words, the last one was better. I have a fear of that inevitability of people liking something more than something else or less than something else. But, and I tell this to writers who are just starting out as well, the truth of this industry is if that your fear is louder than your want, you will not survive. You don't have to get rid of fear. Like, fear is just an inevitable and natural part of any creative process because you're making yourself vulnerable, but you have to want it always more than you are afraid of it. And I have to remind myself that pretty daily when I'm sitting down to work is, do I want this? Do I want to tell this story more than I'm afraid of being judged and found wanting? And for me, if that's a one day, the answer is no, that's okay. If I ask that question every day and the answer is no, I have a problem.
Thank you. Yeah. Last one.
Hi. So first of all, I love your cat ears. And second, your story, you have a lot of like really great and wonderful characters. So I was wondering, what is your process for creating these characters, and how have those characters evolved as your versions of your story has evolved?
That's a great question, probably a really good one to end on. In some ways, it's, as I said before, the three pillars that form all of my characters are want, fear, and what you're willing to do. But I need them to feel like people. And the fact is that people aren't really good or bad. They are a balance of their strengths and their weaknesses and the ways in which they're wanting and the people that they care about. It's one of the reasons I love ensemble casts. So we don't actually get to know characters through their own perspective. We get to know them through how they interact with others and how other people see them. And I think that's an immense gift when you're playing with perspective. I want them to feel real. And that means I tend to err towards super flawed people because I think the flaws are way more interesting than the strengths. I think the flaws are what make us relate. You know, and the thing is, the Vicious books, Vicious and Vengeful, are books that are not about superpowers. They're not about world domination. They're books about jealousy and about revenge and about fear, and very few of us can relate to world domination. I'm not judging if you do. But most of us have been slighted. Most of us have felt left behind. Most of us have felt underestimated or jealous. And so by really examining the really human, almost small scale flaws that exist in our interpersonal relationships, I'm trying to create people that we relate to, that we see ourselves in. So I'm not interested in archetypes so much as I'm interested in how do I get to the truth of a person that you're going to read, and even if you will come from a completely different walk of life, you can read Victor or Eli or Sydney and say, I've been there and I know how it feels.
Okay, thank you so much.
Of course. Great.
I want to say thank you to
Thank
Victoria
you.
Schwab. And a reminder, she'll be downstairs signing at 1:30.
Yeah, I'll be downstairs signing at 1:30, and I'll be telling ghost stories and talking about ghosts in like 45 minutes, 35 minutes. So I hope I get to see you again. And I just want to say thank you for making this first National Book Festival absolutely wonderful. So.